News First, face to face with Jamal Ratnayaka.
Good evening and welcome to this Thursday's edition of Face to Face, coming to you from our Newsfirst studios in Colombo. For the Newsfirst team, I am Jamal Ratnayaka. Tonight, as always, I have a guest with me who is here to speak about the current political situation in Sri Lanka and also to represent the political party and the movement that he has faith in, and to impress upon our viewers as to why that particular political party should be at the helm of Sri Lanka. Tonight, my guest in the studio is retired Major General Aruna Jayasekera, representing the National People's Power. Thank you very much for joining me this evening, Mr. Jayasekera, and welcome on the show for the very first time.
Thank you very much. Good evening to you.
Good evening to you too. So, get the ball rolling first of all tonight. I will ask you about what you represent within the National People's Power. Before the program, we were having a brief chat and you said that you formed the retired Triforces collective of the NPP. My first question to you tonight is, Mr. Jayasekera, why did you choose the NPP as a movement to form this retired Triforces collective, and what is the collective's responsibility and role within the NPP?
So thank you very much for bringing that question. We, the retired Triforces collective that formed about 1.5 years ago, as you know, the status of the country today is not good, very unfortunate. It's, although that we call it as a financial crisis, it's basically a political crisis, that is the crisis of governance, where that led to the financial crisis when the country went to the bankruptcy, and also the lack of the moral collapse of the society, people, the politicians. We have been in the military for many decades and retired, although that we thought that now 15 years passed after ending the war. If you had plans, about 5-year plans, that is 3-5 years, would have had solid plans, that is to bring the country stable, prosperous, the future for our next generation. So the politicians, the corrupted politicians, they ruined the country, and what we never thought that we would be led to this bankruptcy or the bankrupt country, the failed state which has been declared by the World Organization. So then that we few officers got together and then we had the interaction with the NPP, because we believe the National People's Power with their policies, with the leadership that they have nourished with the integrity, honesty, and which they have a very vision, or the visionary leadership, which they don't want to get anything from the society, that is to give the society and to steer the country into a prosperous and stable country. So then that we thought, I think this is the best party or the best the political party where we as a professional, the retired military people, that is, we want to give a good hand. So we give a very professional support. In the National People's Power, they have a national intellectual organization where all the professionals have got together there, and so they also give different professions that they got together, they give that professional support. So then might as well we thought that is to give a professional support. That is how that we as a collective, so we came forward, because we gave our youth, our happiness, the love of our the loved ones, all for about nearly 3 decades. But as this is the country that we are expecting, which never. So that's what that we came forward.
Right. So, staying on the same topic, I want to ask you this particular question, because you are a retired military person, and the JVP, or the JVP that is leading the NPP, the major political party within the larger alliance of the NPP, has been involved in certain insurgencies in past decades, if you take the 70s and the 80s. And I was questioning, or rather interviewing a guest a couple of days ago, and that person told me that As much as successive governments are responsible for Sri Lanka's bankruptcy, the JVP is also responsible for the loss of property and life that Sri Lanka has experienced over the years, especially because of these insurgencies. And we know during those dark times how Sri Lanka, the state, the military and the insurgents were at loggerheads. So do you believe that now what the JVP and the NPP represents is a clean vision, a vision for a more democratic nation where there will be no disruptions to day-to-day lives of the citizens, and there will be no such insurgencies or no such violence taking place in the country should the NPP come into power?
Absolutely. The Janata Vimukti Peramuna was in fact, that was about many decades ago that they had that. You have to see on the angle of why that they have been pushed to that. That is when the uprising came or this, the surrection came. So they have been the cornered, and so they were not met with the aspirations at that time. So they were pushed to that corner. So that is what that they came in that fashion.
Right.
That is to achieve their aims.
Okay.
Now, as the world is transforming, transformed into the modernized world, the democratically, the Janata Vimukti Peramuna has came forward, that is to expand their organization with the intellectuals and with the people, the society, that is to give a wide recognition for the party. So they came up with the National People's Power. Entirely that is democratically, they always that promote the peace, the democracy, because what does the NPP looks like? I mean, so that is they always the believe the pro-democracy, anti-corrupt and the social justice. That is, they see that the state sector is always that is serve the people, and also the private sector that is to make understand their social responsibility.
Yes.
So that's, I mean, so within that framework, I think so the National People's Power, predominantly the JVP, that is, you need to have a foundation of that is to have some sort of a big political party, because you always had these big political parties in the guise of their personal agendas or the political agendas. This Janata Vimukti Peramuna was, I mean, suppressed by alligating different the perceptions.
Okay.
So that is what that will be there cornered. But you cannot do that the long term. So the truth comes, and the truth that the people believe. So that has come now. I think that this is a very fine opportunity that is to them to exhibit the what is real democracy, and the world community also has given a very good recognition as by that you have seen many the diplomatic corps that they have been invited and they are visiting, patronizing the National People's Power. So that's, I think, the clear manifestation that is to say that National People's Power is very well set up for the democracy, to promote democracy.
Right. You spoke about the National People's Power engaging with other regional peers and also superpowers in the world. We saw earlier in January when the leader of the National People's Power, Aruna, January or February, if I am recalling correctly, he went to India, met with some of the top brass in India's administrative structure, met with top corporate leaders, made visits to certain corporations, and in December there was another visit to China that wasn't widely publicized, but that too happened. And recently he has met with some of the ambassadors and also key diplomats here in Sri Lanka. So the MPP seems to be making moves very well ahead of a possible election later this year. And the foreign policy NPP will follow should it come to power is going to be vital, especially taking into account what we are experiencing in the world right now, from wars and cold wars that are going on, and this region, especially the Sea of Sri Lanka, has gained much more importance than it did several decades or several years ago. So what sort of a foreign policy, as a military man, tell me, what sort of a foreign policy should the MPP adopt, and how is the retired military collective or the retired Triforces collective supporting the NPP's vision of creating the perfect, robust foreign policy?
Yeah, very a topical question. I mean, Sri Lanka is an island nation, that we have to always think about that you cannot progress a country towards a stable or prosperous country in isolation. It's a globalized world. We are strategically located in the midst of these giant seas. If you could remember, I don't know whether you have read about a few centuries ago, there's a maritime strategist called Admiral Thayer Mahan. So he had he has said that this the Indian Ocean region, the importance of the Indian Ocean region, whoever who has control over it, said that he can give a very fine dominance to the world affairs. So Sri Lanka is in the midst of that.
Right.
The Sri Lanka, that's, you know, the pearl of the Indian Ocean, is not that sake of telling that good old our ancestors that have been brought about or that given that label.
Yes, yes.
So does the Sri Lanka stand in the midst of that, the global politics? You know, in the second term of the Obama's period, so he had mentioned, or he has shifted his foreign policy towards the Asia. That's called the pivot to Asia policy, where that they have had the strategic partnership with India. So India, that we always that consider that's very important for Sri Lankan politically, socially, economically. So that's where that we are located here. So that opens up to this Indian Ocean, this vast sea. So therefore that we have to have a very close relationship with India.
Certainly.
So when it comes to the national people's power foreign policy, that's always that promote the balanced diplomacy, that we respect all world powers.
Okay.
All world powers, and then so India is also one such country that we also have power, and also that we have other big countries like in the Indian Ocean region, that there are sea lines of communications that passing right in front of Sri Lanka, which is very strategically important for the global trade. So the global commons, that's today, which is very decisive for the global trades, and that's the reason why these all big powers, you call it, eyeing for this region.
Yes.
So does the national people's power foreign policy that is based on the economic diplomacy, balanced diplomacy, that is to promote to the collaborative effort. It is not only the bilateral, trilateral or multilateral, the cooperations that is to gain to Sri Lanka. It is not only the give to the others. So that, I mean, you promote yourself, that is to attract the foreign the powers, that is to use our the country, that is for facilitate some services for the economic benefits.
Right.
It's not only that you give everything on a tray and then to give it to that big power. So it's not that foreign policy that we believe, or the national people's power. They very specifically mentioned that always that we respect the world powers, and India is one such that we have to have a very close collaborative, because we share similar cultures, and we have had a very long the relationship with India. Although sometimes different governments to governments we had some frictions over it over the years. But the foreign policy is very clear about it, that we are a balance. The economic diplomacy is always promoting.
Right. So let's talk about national security and Sri Lanka's territorial integrity. When Sri Lanka was faced with bankruptcy and we were going through the economic crisis, India certainly did come to help with aid over $4 billion, and even China, they came forward, and the other creditor nations of Sri Lanka have agreed to, or in the process of brokering debt restructuring deal. But amidst all this, there might come a time where Sri Lanka will have to cede authority of some of its vital assets in order to revive its economy. What is your take on what sort of assets we must cede, or rather we must allow foreign investors to take part in and also to invest in, whereas the state must hold several assets within it? It must hold governance of those national assets. What sort of assets must the state reserve within itself? What sort of assets must the state open up for foreign investments, but also with a certain stake and interest to Sri Lanka?
Yes, that's a very fine question. I mean, now we have to see it in the other angle of that question, that is as what assets or what strategically important things that make Sri Lanka important. It's not only the sea around that Sri Lanka, that you have got a natural harbor into east and also on other airports,
Yes.
and then the cultural values and also the fine education system and the people. So there are 5 national powers that you have in a country, that is economy, political, then the willpower of the people, and the military.
Yes.
Is also that, you know, that we have been engaged in a civil war for a period, but now you have to think about how better that we can progress economically. So national security in that perspective is the foremost thing, that always that we have to think about the territorial integrity and sovereignty should not or must not be compromised at any cost. So those assets that we said as to have a collaborative, the cooperative or the cooperation between the other, the foreign, the powers. It doesn't mean that you give everything to those powers to come and, I mean, to do whatever that they want.
Yes,
No,
or to make
there's
use of.
always that you have to think about the national security perspective in the first, must not compromise.
Right.
So, and based on that our foreign policy is being also made, and the economic policy is made. It is the national security policy is not made it in isolation. That always they think foreign policy, health, education, irrigation, and all those other policies. All the previous the regimes or the eras didn't have a national policy. National policy that you need to have, I mean, to frame the other policies.
Right.
And then that you frame the national security policy, then you strategize all the military strategy or whatever. So likewise, that foreign policy is being framed meticulously in line with all the other national security, economic, education, health, and other policies.
Right.
So the national security, as I told you, territorial integrity, sovereignty is the foremost. So without compromising that, so that you have to have the collaborative, cooperative engagement for the economic development.
Right. So what sort of a role will the military, the Triforces, play in an NPP-led government? We know that although we had a decades-long war, there is no more war, but we need a military and the Triforces to defend the nation should the need arise. But we saw during certain governments, military personnel were assigned to maybe the beautification of certain cities. They were assigned to various other activities. But what sort of a role will the military play? And also talk to me about the development of the military to keep up to date with the latest technologies, the latest trends, the latest armaments and so on. I know Sri Lanka is comparatively a small military, but we must always be updated on the latest happenings and the trends in the world. So what sort of a role will the military play, Mr. Jayasekera, within an NPP-led government?
Yes, although that our military was considerably a small when you compare with the other big militaries,
peers,
the assembly is very small, although that we are small. I think that we are the best that the militaries ever had in this region. That is on the counter-insurgency. We have acquired the wealth of knowledge on different spheres of that, the troubles or the conflicts. So in the retired tribe forces collective represent the same people who are retired, so
Yes.
that we have very different capacities. It is not only the fighting, I mean, so that we have the professional knowledge that everybody, excuse me, who represent the tribe forces collective. So once the national people's power is being established, the government, definitely that they would in this year. So the capacities what the military contingent or the retired military contingent that national people's power had, so that they will utilize in different sectors where that where their policies are workable, that is to bring the economic the development in the areas in Sri Lanka. The Sri Lanka that is contiguous to the many important seas around the world. So therefore the Navy or the Sri Lanka Navy and the Air Force, that they have got different experience on those,
Yes.
which they have exposed into the many the world the navies and the air forces, like military that I represented, the army that we have had. So our capacities can be utilized for the economic development. It doesn't mean that you have all these retired military people the way that the politicians wants. No, the professional knowledge, professional competence. Today we lack of the leadership, that is the political leadership. What they have. We don't have politics today. We don't have politicians also today. Although that you call it, what we have is some group of people that who have been divided interest on their personal agenda or the political agendas, and they do their politics. Some business crowd, they divided the society into sectors and they do politics. So it doesn't mean that that politicians that they decide what the way that they want. The national people's power is not such, so they get hold of all the professions' support. That is what they have, this national intellectual organization. We, being the retired tribe forces collective, into that. So they know as what capacities that we have, and then to utilize for the best interest of the country.
Right. So you mentioned a very important fact, Mr. Jayasekera, just now. You said that legacy political parties or political parties that have been in power in Sri Lanka have used the strategy of divide and conquer, where they divide certain segments of society, they incite violence, make them fight between each other, and then they rise to power. What sort of a strategy does the NPP have to ensure that Sri Lanka becomes a harmonious society, to bridge the gap between the north and the south, to bring better representation to underrepresented ethnicities, to underrepresented communities in Sri Lanka? What sort of a vision does the NPP hold in that regard?
Yeah, I think we have lost the credibility of the international, the community over the past, over the period of time. That is the state credibility as a stable partner that we have diminished. It has been diminished. That is because of this party polarizations what we had over a period of time. As I told you just before, the short while ago, that our politics plays for on their personal agendas, not towards the people's aspirations to fulfill. What you have to see is the society. I mean, you have lost the values, the moral values that I personally, if I take, so I must carry myself with self-discipline first, and then you must respect to the next man,
Right.
and then also that you have respect to the environment. So then only that the society exists. Which the party politicians, which you have the traditional all politicians, they had the divided. But the NPP or the National People's Power, they always promote the harmony within the society or the people, communities. They always have the Sri Lankan identity, which we had lost for over a period of time. That you call it, that is a Buddhist, Sinhala, Muslim and all, but we all are Sri Lankans. Once you promote it, only that the world recognizes identity that is comes. So the National People's Power, so that is there, that is to promote the Sri Lankan. The party polarization is the one that who divided the, okay, that is their the upcountry north people or Udarata, Patharata and this and that. So they are itself that you have been divided. Like the divide and rule that Britishers had about over a period of centuries, so they carried
That's
forward.
been carried on.
That is carried on. So which that is they played that the game that is for their survival, which the national people's power, they live with the people. They understand what the humanity, what they understand the general normal civilian or the people. The people, that is what I said, that is their, what the NPP looks like is to serve the people.
Right.
Always serve the people, make the private sector to understand the social responsibility. The national people's power is not only an alternative, it's a comprehensive solution that is to steer the country towards the prosperous and stable country.
Right. The NPP envisions a country where every citizen identifies himself or herself as Sri Lankan and nothing else. That is the message that my guest tonight, Major General Aruna Jayasekera, has for our viewers. Major General Aruna Jayasekera is part of the retired Triforces Collective of the National People's Power. Thank you very much, Mr. Jayasekera, for joining me this evening.
And it's my pleasure. Thank you very much for giving this opportunity.
Certainly, and that's the way it was on Face to Face this evening. Thank you very much and have yourselves a great night.